we're getting ready for another test. I know that you are so excited because you have been studying 10 minutes a night, and now you are ready to show me what you got. So we'll try and put this all together, review a little bit today, and then in our next class period, we will take the test. Now, what if I said you can't use your notebook for the next test? Well, you can. Just make sure it's done. So let's go over our notebook a little bit and review today, and then I'll describe to you what you need to do for this lesson. We started on notebook page 85. How we know this is because page 85 is highlighted. Our learning target was, I understand that characteristics of mature plants and animals are inherited. Our four terms were heredity, genetics, genes, and alleles. And with this lesson, we looked at our actual personal traits to see if we had a dominant gene for any of those traits and whether they showed up in our physical appearance, right? On page 86, it says, I understand that inherited traits are passed to offspring on chromosomes. We talked about a purebred being an organism that always produces offspring with the same form of trait as a parent. Meiosis is the process by which the number of chromosomes is reduced by half so that sex cells can be formed. And when sex cells combine to produce offspring, each sex cell will contribute half the number of chromosomes. Thus, the offspring gets the normal number of chromosomes, half from each parent. Human body cells contain how many chromosomes? And the sperm has half and the egg has half. So, and then I asked, why are offspring created by two parents, not a blend of both parents? Well, one parent has a dominant allele, or when you put them together, there's a dominant allele present that masks the presence of a recessive gene. Our next notebook, page 87, I can identify basic genetic information used in a Punnett Square. So we started using Punnett Squares, and we had to identify a genotype. Remember, a genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism, and it's represented by letters, okay? And then a phenotype is the physical result of a gene combination, like your cleft chin, your curly hair. You can curl your tongue, like you cross your right thumb over your left. And then another term was homozygous. That's the paired alleles for a trait that are identical. So like identical T's or R's. Heterozygous are paired alleles for a trait that are different, like a capital and a lowercase. Okay, they don't match. On notebook page 88, we actually used Punnett Squares to determine possible genotypes and phenotypes for offspring. And we talked about dominant, I just bumped my thing here. Let's see if I can't get that back. There we go. I can use a Punnett Square to determine possible genotypes and phenotypes of offspring. So remember, a dominant is when one allele can mask the presence of another, which is represented by a capital letter. Whenever you have a capital letter, you have, right, a dominant allele. Recessive is a characteristic that is masked by a dominant allele. It's represented by a lowercase letter. Our notes included the dominant gene is always listed first. So you always list the capital letter first, just like in the periodic table of elements. The only way to have a recessive trait expressed is to have both alleles be recessive, like a lowercase b and a lowercase b, lowercase r, lowercase r. So then I had you complete seed shape. We always put the male on the top, and we put the female on the side. And so as we were putting this together, hopefully you had a capital R and a capital R, lowercase r, lowercase r. And so all of them were capital R, lowercase r. So 100% of them would be dominant, which is round. Okay, so the male was round. The female actually was wrinkled because she had both recessive genes. So round, wrinkled. The shapes of the offspring are all round. And the phenotype of the offspring, that's the physical characteristic, so that would be round. And then the genotype would have been capital R, lowercase r. Okay? Make sure you have ask if you have questions about that one. All right. The next thing we did was a cool lab where we tracked and record the passing of traits through 3 generations. And we looked at some grandparents, some parents, and then the children. And we said of the 4 offspring from generation 3, how many inherited a trait from the generation 1 grandparents? So of these, how many inherited a trait? And so all of them did, 100% of them, or all 4 of them inherited a trait. One of them inherited, they all inherited an A, B, C, or D, right? These are all the traits. Is it possible for generation 3 offspring to not inherit a particular trait? The answer here was yes, it is possible. And if you did all the combinations, you could find out that you could completely eliminate a trait by the 3rd generation. All right, here we go. I can collect data and use a Punnett Square to predict the genotype and phenotype percentages in offspring. We did a monster heredity lab for this one, right? 1 hair, 2 hairs. And we used popsicle sticks or pieces of paper, and we put genotypes and phenotypes here. So remember, check to see that your genotypes are all letters, and check to see that your phenotypes are all physical characteristics, which would be 1 hair or 2 hairs, okay? For an capital H, lowercase h cross, hopefully you checked all of your answers with your resource documents, but if you didn't, hopefully you had a capital H, lowercase h, and 2 small lowercase h's here. And you had capital H, lowercase h here, capital H, lowercase h here, and then these were lowercase h's, lowercase h's. So you had 50% with 1 hair and 50% with 2 hairs. And then if you had a homozygous with 1 hair cross, for number 11, you had to make sure that you had like either capital H, or lowercase h. Oh, wait a minute. 1 hair was dominant, right? So that would be all capital H's. So all of them would be capital H's, and all of them would have 1 hair, which would be 100%, and that would be 0%. Okay. Then we moved into reproduction and how that actually happens. We looked at like crossing things, but like how do they cross? Well, from reproduction, whether it's asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. Reminder that asexual reproduction happens with only 1 parent, and the offspring are identical to the parent. Remember that sexual reproduction happens with 2 parents, and the offspring are different from both parents. And an advantage of sexual reproduction would be that there could be a variety of genes passed, right? Maybe a chance for adaptations. A disadvantage of sexual reproduction is that it might take longer because you have to find a mate, okay? So then we were identifying and giving examples of asexual reproduction. I gave you binary fission, and examples might be an amoeba and a bacteria or a paramecium. Budding would have been with like a hydra or a potato. Fragmentation would be like a planaria or a starfish. Vegetative fragmentation would have been with, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a complete blank right now. Vegetative fragmentation, sorry, might have happened with like a spider plant or a strawberry, just if you have a part of a vegetable that actually grows into a vegetable or it goes runners, okay? Spores, examples would have been ferns and fungi. So an advantage of asexual reproduction is it can happen rapidly, and you only need 1 parent, okay? A disadvantage of asexual reproduction is that there's no variety in the species, and so if one dies, they will all die if it affects a particular gene. There's no variety. All right, last page, 93. On page 93, you were able to use a model to simulate harmful events on a population that reproduces asexually. So as you went down and you gathered data, you should have all 3s to start. And then when each paramecia reproduces once, you should have all 6s. And then all the yellow die. So you would have 6, 6, 6, 0. And then event 3, a deadly disease kills all the red. And each survivor reproduces 1 time. So you would have 12 pink, 12 blue, and 0 red because they all died, and 0 yellow. So a next thing happens is a predator strikes and kills all the blue. and half of the pink. So you're down to 6 pink and 0 of the rest of the population. Event 6, all surviving produce 1 time. So 6 of them produce 1 time. So you get to 12, but there's not enough food, and you get back down to 6, and all surviving reproduce 1 time, and then you're back up to 12. So I asked you to explain which type of paramecium had the best genes in the pond. So clearly the pink were the ones that survived long enough to reproduce, so they had the best genes. What might happen if disease and predators did not exist in the pond? Well, that would have been a problem too, because then you have all this rapid reproduction and you have huge population growth. You would have hundreds of different types of paramecium in the pond, and eventually they would run out of space, they would run out of food, and they would die back down. So, all right, today's lesson. If you haven't been checking in, check in. Okay, today's lesson. Thank you for reviewing with me. Your notebook should be up to date at this point. So if it's not, make sure you get it up to date. Complete the study guide, okay? Make sure your notebook's up to date. Complete the study guide. When you're done, watch the video of me going over the study guide. And then you need to create 15 flashcards. Today, you're going to submit a picture of your 15 flashcards. I want 7 of them facing up with the terms and 8 of them facing with the definition up, right? So you have 15 flashcards, 7 up with the term, 7 up with the definition. Take a picture of it and submit that for credit as proof that you studied. All right, let's get to it. So you're smart, intelligent, and have all the knowledge you need for the test next class that you're going to ace.